mode.
Hi, welcome. My name is Carrie McAteer from DePaul University, and I manage our Employer Relations in the Career Center, and I'm really excited to talk with you today about the whole process behind hiring interns and really walking you through that. And thrilled to be here with my colleague, our Senior Associate General Counsel. I'll let her introduce herself.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Marla Morgan. I serve as the Senior Associate General Counsel at DePaul, work with Carrie often, and we are excited to speak with you this afternoon about best practices and some legal realities regarding internships.
So let's have the first poll question come up. So here's an overview of what we're going to talk about today, some of the different areas that I want to focus on, and we'll dive into a few other areas as well. But let's find out where everyone on the call is from. It's interesting to know that. So if we can have that first poll question. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go, it looks like we have a lot of people from the Chicago metro area and some other states as well, so that's great. We're going to go through the content, and then hopefully if you have questions, just submit them, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll go ahead and both of us will answer any questions that you have, but please feel free to share those questions with us. So we'll go ahead and really get started here.
Hold on, we're having little technical difficulties.
Okay, so I love this picture because this is absolutely what an internship is not supposed to be, filling coffee for their manager. But I'd love to know, sort of how many of you have already had interns, so I know where we're starting from with this group. So let's start that next poll question.
Well, this is we want to welcome you from the WBDC as well, and so this question is also a WBDC question. So right after we have this question, we probably have the content question.
Okay. Okay, so.
Okay.
You can close it.
Mm-hmm. Good. This is good to know.
Okay. Let's go to the next.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about what makes an internship rewarding. There's a lot of different components that go into this, and if you can really, incorporate all of these different pieces into your internship experience, you will find that students go back on campus and they will be your #1 ambassador. They will tell their friends about the internship, and you will hopefully just create a pipeline of interns from whatever university you're recruiting from, whether it's DePaul or elsewhere. So starting at the top, learning goals and objectives are very important to making it a successful, robust internship. And in the guide that you'll be sent after the presentation, we include some sample learning goals that students really want to see and know what they will be, the knowledge they're going to be acquiring upon completion of internship. So we'll talk more about this in the internship description, but you want to really think through before you hire an intern, what are you going to have that student learning and what are the objectives? Because again, an internship isn't just about the work, it's about the learning experience as well. So we ask that moving along that interns don't do more than 25% clerical work. We certainly do clerical work in our jobs. It's not my favorite part, but interns should not spend most of their day on data entry. The next piece isn't really my sort of the most exciting piece I think about internships, and that's networking. Because college students typically may not have a lot of networking experience, but if you can bring them with you to networking events, I'm sure you go to association events or any chamber events yourself, bring your intern along so that they can be exposed to this whole world of networking. How many have had?
So just let me know.
Okay, let's do the next poll question. How many of you have already had interns yourself? Let's see. So it looks like, great. Can you see the question?
Yes, they can see the question.
Okay. So it looks like about 80% have not had interns before, so this is a great group to be sharing this information with. All right. So more and more employers, thanks for your patience with that, are using interns as a pipeline of talent. About 62% of employers, according to the National Association of Colleges and Employers last year, offered their interns full-time jobs. So not only is it a great opportunity for you to have an intern helping you with a special project, but it's a great way for you to identify potential future full-time employees. And we see that happening a lot. And again, the more you recruit from a university, the easier it's going to be able to create that pipeline of talent.
Sorry, we're just having a little technical difficulties. Please be patient. Thank you.
So what is the return on investment for you to hire interns? Because it certainly does take you some time to manage an intern. But you'll see here with some statistics I've got up here that, again, it's a pretty high return on investment as far as bringing interns into your organization as a full-time hire. And the retention rate is also something I think that's interesting. The latest information I could find was from 2013, but if you look at interns who are brought into an organization at 1 year, 89% of them, after 1 year of an employment with you, are still with the organization versus only 80% of those employees you brought in from other resources. And at 5 years, those interns, again, that you brought in as full-time hires, are sticking around a lot longer than those that were hired from a website or other resources. So it's a pretty high return on investment for you as an employer to take on an intern. Okay, Thank you. So let's go ahead and talk about the first most important piece of recruiting interns, which is putting together a job description, an internship description. You won't get interns unless you have a great internship description. And there's a lot of text up here, but I want to walk you through each component of writing a description. So the first is, obviously, you want to give a description of who you are as an organization. The next piece, you want to have at least 3 to 4 specific job responsibilities you have that student working on. So again, you want to really think through what the intern will be doing for your organization before you just put out a post that you want to hire one. Again, learning goals and objectives need to be identified and included in the description. 2 to 3 of those is really what we ask for. And then a sentence or two about how the student is going to be supervised is also important. So you could say the intern will be meeting with the president of the company or their manager on a weekly basis. And don't overlook the importance of that because students really want that direct contact with their supervisor. And then lastly, just going through these, you want to have, what are you looking for? What is the criteria in the student? And then the application process. Do you want a resume, cover letter, or writing sample? That is really up to you to decide, but the internship description is an important piece of making this a successful process. And in the internship guide that, again, I'll send you out after this, we include some really nice samples of internship descriptions that you could work off of yourself. All right, so once you put that internship description together, how can we at DePaul help you with recruiting interns? So I'm going to give you some specific things we do at DePaul's Career Center, but you'll find that at other universities, since we've got people from different states here, you'll find that their Career Centers probably offer very similar opportunities. So starting with office hours and workshops. So what does that mean exactly? Well, we open up opportunities to our employers to come on campus and do one-on-one sessions with students. You're not necessarily recruiting for an open position, but you would come in, we set up the schedule and talk to students in 30-minute increments about resume building, practice interviews, just general information about careers. The benefit is really twofold. One, for students, they get an opportunity to meet with a professional. And secondly, it allows you to build your brand on campus. So if it's a downtime for you and you're not necessarily recruiting for a lot of positions, it's a way to get on campus and build your brand. Okay, so once you've got that job description together, we use a job board called Handshake. More and more universities are using this site. It's a free service for you to post internships and jobs. And the link to that is included in the information you'll get following up to this. It's a really easy site to use. And again, there's no cost. That is where all DePaul students go to look for internships and jobs. On-campus interviews, if anyone in the Chicago area would like to use our interviewing suites, that is an option for you as well. We have several different rooms you can use. We coordinate the schedule for you. You can knock out several interviews, 8 to 10 interviews in one day. And then if you'd like to do the follow-up interview back in your office, that's always a possibility as well. So that's a nice service we offer, but you do not have to take advantage of that. And then lastly, job and internship fairs, which you are probably familiar with. We offer multiple internship job fairs throughout the year. We have one coming up on June 14th at our Lincoln Park campus. And it's an opportunity to get in front of several hundred students, whether you're recruiting for internships or jobs. The cost to attend, it's a nominal fee, but it's held at our Lincoln Park campus. And again, the date for that is June 14th. If you're interested, we can send more information about that too. So we're getting to the process now where you've hired an intern. So what do you do at this point? This is an important piece of having a successful internship experience. So I want to spend a few minutes on this process of onboarding an intern and mentoring. If the first few days of the student's experience don't work out that well, it may not be a great experience for them. So I really see onboarding an intern very much the same as you would onboard an employee, in that it's done in 3 phases. So let me walk you through that. So you've hired the intern. The first thing you want to do is get an email out to your team about the new student you're bringing on board. You know, we're really excited to have this intern join us. She's from this university. Also, let the student know ahead of time if there's paperwork they need to fill out on that first day so they can bring all the documents they need. And it's also a great time to share with your intern before that first day that they can receive academic credit for their internship experience through their university. And you can direct them to me or your career center to find out how the student can receive academic credit. And then we've got day 1. So what do you do with the student on the first day? I recommend taking the student to lunch, also walking them around, introducing them to key staff. The other thing you would really should do is set up a weekly meeting with that student. So on day 1, say we're going to be meeting once a week, and have a standing meeting so the student knows they can meet with you every week, Wednesday at 2 o'clock. And sometimes they'll save up all their questions until that specific day. But it's important to have a weekly standing meeting with the student. The other piece you want to do on the first day is get out those learning goals and objectives and review those so that the student remembers, okay, you stress to the student this is what you're expecting from them and what you expect to get out of the internship. So you'll see that the onboarding, if you do it in 3 phases, it's a little less overwhelming, and it helps make that internship a smooth, successful experience. So let's have that next poll question, please. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm curious to know how you really envision an intern working with you. Will it be out of the student's home from campus? Will it be in a sort of brick or mortar setting office, or a combination of both? And it looks like the majority of you are either going to have them doing some remote, some office work, and a good percentage of you will have the student in your office. Oh. Let's close the poll. Okay, that's helpful for me to know as I get into this next piece. Can I just go to the next slide? Yeah. Now you hold these working. Okay, since we do have quite a few of you that will either have the student just working from home or from the office or both, I want to share with you some tips on how to make what we call virtual internship experiences successful. So I've put some pictures up here on the slide that really are different ways that you can do this. So let's start with networking. So the student may not be working with you in your office every day, but again, bringing them with you to meetings where they can meet your clients, opening up opportunities to them to attend events with you. You know, I always say that the meetings we have at DePaul seem to be nonstop. May not be exciting for me all the time, but an intern can learn so much by shadowing you and just sitting in on a meeting. And again, it provides them with that networking. So we have a picture of DePaul here in the right-hand corner because this is a great way to meet face-to-face with the intern once a week. You can just do it on campus. Again, reviewing those learning goals is very important if the student will not be working with you every day in the office. And then lastly up there, I just have a coffee shop. A lot of employers will have what I call a working session with their intern, where they just pull out their laptops and together they sit there and they work for an hour or two. So it gives that student that experience of face-to-face interaction with you. And then they also will be doing, of course, their work elsewhere. So the flexibility this generation really finds attractive. So if you will be offering some work from home, some from the office, I think you'll find students do appreciate that. I do want to stress, though, if you will have a student working entirely from home, so about 12% of you, you really want to look for a student who's a junior or a senior, so someone a little more mature that's probably already done an internship versus hiring someone as a first year or second year student. So social media is certainly a popular type of internship. We get a lot of requests for these. They can either be successful or they can be disasters if they're not done right. So what I want to do is just walk you through a few key components of a social media internship to make it successful for you. So one thing we don't want students to do is just get thrown into, go do the social media for my organization, not having any training on the strategy behind what the message is that you want to get across in your social media. What I would recommend is setting up, just having a meeting with the students so they understand what your goal is, and then they can go and do the research, they can find the articles, they can set up the tweets, and then of course you want to read everything before it gets published, before it's sent out. So the mentoring and training piece comes in by really explaining, okay, this is what we want to do. We want to grow our business in this direction, letting the student understand that piece of it. Established metrics is something I've heard from employers tell me really makes it successful and holds the student accountable. So you could say we want to increase our likes on Facebook by 25%, or we want to have X number of Twitter followers by the end of the month. So again, that when you have those weekly meetings, you can say, okay, let's talk about how's it going. We're either getting a lot of that or we're missing some of the metrics we've established for this social media internship. So setting up some metrics really makes it a little more concise. And then learning goals around the social media internship, sort of what I just referenced, very important, so that they can not just contribute to you in a really valuable, meaningful way, but again, that they're getting a great experience out of it that they can take to their next internship or to their next employer. So one of the things to, I think, really having a successful relationship with the university and being here to help and support you is to be on campus regularly. So we have a few events coming up that I'd like to invite you to attend. We have our employer workshop series we are rolling out for the first time this year as a way to just help you in different, throughout the different processes of hiring students or full-time employees, making it a successful one for you. So we have one on April 21st. We'll really get into in that session the process of hiring, interviewing students, and examples of onboarding. And then on May 25th, we'll again get into more in-depth on this topic of mentoring, managing, and sustaining relationships with DePaul students. And then we have our job and internship fair coming up in the middle of June. So again, following up to this session, you'll receive a document with more information on how to register for the employer workshop series and for the job fair. So now I want to get into a question that we get a lot from employers, which is how can my student receive academic credit? And a lot of times we hear, I will give them academic credit. But employers actually cannot give the credit themselves. The students receive academic credit for an internship. They enroll in an academic course at DePaul while they're doing the internship with you. So that's why it's important in that sort of pre-onboarding that you say to the student, you know, hey, are you interested in receiving credit? If you are, talk to the Career Center. It's a regular course that they are taking or paying for. It's part of their tuition. And at DePaul, we have an experiential learning requirement I want to mention because it's somewhat unique in that our students cannot graduate and walk across that stage until they have fulfilled some sort of learning outside of the classroom. It can be an internship, it can be study abroad, it can be community-based service learning. Internships are very popular for DePaul students. So we're working with a big pool of students at DePaul that want to do internships because this is a graduation requirement for the experiential learning. They have to work 100 hours with you throughout the quarter. That is not a minimum, but they certainly, I mean, that is the minimum, but they can work more than that. However, if it's an unpaid internship, and I'll get into this on the next slide, we don't want them working more than 10 to 15 hours a week maximum for unpaid internships. The last piece about a student receiving credit that is required is that the supervisor is willing to manage and mentor the student throughout the internship, and that they're willing to fill out a supervisor evaluation about halfway through the quarter. We want, that is part of the student's course, and it's important that that gets sent back to us. So other than that, you know, I also want to stress that all students may not want credit. You may have a student that says, listen, I've already done an internship for credit, I don't want to pay to take another class. So we encourage you not to make it mandatory that they receive course credit for these reasons I mentioned earlier. And then the last piece I'm going to talk about before turning it over to our Associate General Counsel is why paying interns is so important. And I recognize that we probably have a few organizations that are in that early startup phase perhaps on this call. But let me walk you through this, the different reasons why, and then I'll give you some creative ways that you can offer compensation if an hourly wage is not possible. So this is why interns who are paid work out typically better for the employer and the student. Most of DePaul students, at least 60, I think it's 65%, are working at least part-time while they're in school, some full-time. So they're taking full course load, working part-time, and if they take on an unpaid internship on top of that, at some point they just get stretched too thin. So that is one reason why we encourage all employers, especially for-profit organizations, to pay. You will certainly get more candidates, a more diverse pool of applicants for the paid internship postings. And lastly, you'll receive, again, that measurable ROI, the return on investment, because paid interns are more likely to stay with you longer than an unpaid internship. If you do not have the budget right now to pay, because you're in a startup or you're a nonprofit, we recommend other things like perhaps offering a stipend. So we've seen $500 stipends, $1,000 stipends where you split that up halfway through the quarter. So offer half of it at 5 weeks and then the remaining half after 10 weeks. And that shows the student that you really do value the work they're doing. The average hourly wage is about $13 an hour. So that, I've walked you through how to have a successful internship program. A piece of that, though, that's really important, you'll now hear from Marla.
Thanks, Carrie. And the compensation piece is really a nice segue into my portion of our presentation today. The legal implications of having interns is something that really has been in the media quite a bit in recent years. When the economy started to struggle 5-6 years ago, there started to be an uptick in students wanting to do internships in order to get a leg up in the workplace, and in companies wanting to kind of have perhaps what they would consider to be free labor. High-profile companies, companies like Condé Nast and Fox Searchlight, have faced lawsuits from disgruntled interns who said, you know what, I wasn't paid appropriately for the work that I did. The Department of Labor, which is referenced here on your slide, is the government agency that gets involved in these issues. And that's what we want to talk about today, is the Department of Labor internship rules and how you can leverage those rules in order to protect yourselves legally and also to offer a really high-quality internship. You'll see that a lot of what I'm going to be speaking about in this portion of the presentation really overlaps quite a bit with what Carrie said. The rules and the best practices are quite similar, but this is another lens to look through those issues on and to understand those issues through. So the baseline understanding, of course, is that people get paid for the work that they do, unless there's a reason for them not to. And because lawyers like to make up fancy words that aren't used in everyday speech, the Department of Labor refers to something called a student trainee. Student trainee is really just a fancy way of saying interns. And the understanding here is that if you satisfy this 6-factor test, which we're going to talk about in some detail, then an individual does not have to be paid in accordance with the wage and hour laws. And when I say that, wage and hour laws, you're talking about the whole package, assessing whether an individual is an exempt employee versus a non-exempt employee, paying minimum wage, keeping track of an individual's time, and paying for overtime worked. So if an individual is in fact a student trainee because they meet these 6 factors, then the individual is not entitled to wages, they're not an employee, and all the wage and hour rules do not need to be paid. Do not need to be followed. So I say paid other than in accordance with the wage and hour laws rather than sort of paid and unpaid, because there really are 2 categories of folks that we need to be cognizant of in meeting this test. And that's unpaid interns and also stipend paid interns. So Carrie offered a lot of really excellent practical suggestions for creative ways to compensate an intern for the work that they're doing other than paying them in accordance with the wage and hour laws. And that's paying a stipend of a nominal amount, offering some reimbursement for expenses, offering any number of perks. But all of those concepts still mean that the individual is paid other than in accordance with the wage and hour laws. And that's the time where an internship site wants to be really very cognizant of the 6 factors that we're going to discuss. If an individual is paid in accordance with the wage and hour laws, you have an employee who you've brought in, you're paying them minimum wage, they're keeping track of their time, they're being paid overtime, but you're just referring to them as an intern and creating an internship experience for them, then these factors can kind of be considered as best practices, but they're not legally required in the same way that they are for an individual who is unpaid or paid other than in accordance with the wage and hour laws. And the last thing I just want to talk about before we get into the factors with some specificity is those of you who may be not-for-profit workplaces. We hear a lot from not-for-profit internship sites, oh, well, we'll just classify folks as a volunteer. And it's true that in the not-for-profit context, there is another category of folks who are on site doing some work who aren't paid, and that is volunteers. But the volunteer test under the law is really quite different than the internship test. So I don't recommend that folks think of those as interchangeable things. If you have someone who kind of walks and talks and looks like an intern, we should be looking to see if they meet this test. So let's turn to the elements of that test specifically. And as Carrie mentioned, you'll be receiving some materials after the presentation today, which will include a handout that has this detail on it, as well as some practical best practices and red flags that go along with each of these factors. So factor number 1 is that the internship training is similar to that which would be given at an academic education institution. And that goes to this credit issue that Carrie was talking about a couple moments ago. Unfortunately, we will often see internship sites say that they will not allow an intern unless the internship is going to be for credit at the educational institution. And while that's kind of a simple proxy for getting at this factor, it's actually not required. Your interns could be students who are between semesters. They could be students who aren't in a position to take on additional credit. Your interns may not even be students at all. There certainly is a growing market for alums who are looking for additional experience through an internship. Really limiting an internship to 4 credit experiences limits participation, as Carrie said. You will see a drop in the diversity and perhaps in the quality of interns that you are receiving. So how do we meet this factor if credit isn't being given? And this gets back to that concept about learning objectives. Having embedded educational components within the internship, having really clearly articulated and then followed learning objectives, creating an intentional learning space is really the way to satisfy this factor. As long as there is some academic benefit or sort of scheme that is being followed, then this first factor would be met. One easy way to document this is through a formal learning agreement. So that's one option for making clear that an internship is having an educational component. So turning to factor 2, the second factor is that the internship is for the benefit of the student, not the internship site. And I think this factor is phrased in a little bit of an absolutist way. It's okay to go ahead and insert primarily is for the primary benefit of the student, not the internship site. There's going to be some mutual benefit, and that's okay. But what you want to be focusing on in trying to satisfy this factor is to make sure that the intern is doing work that is broadly applicable, that they're learning skills that can be transferred to a number of different workplaces, generalizable skills across a field, across an industry, that they're not learning site-specific skills that really won't benefit them outside of the particular context that they're in. Again, some documentation that could help with this item is to have a learning document that talks about the management skills that they are learning, perhaps. So just, again, tying back to those learning objectives. Factor number 3 is a really important one, and it's actually kind of 2 factors in one, because, again, you know those lawyers like to complicate their multi-factor tests. Factor 3 is that the intern does not displace a regular employee, but instead is closely supervised by other employees. And I'm going to break that out into 2 different components as we talk about them. So the idea of an intern not displacing a regular employee is relatively straightforward. Interns are not and should not be seen as temporary employees who replace someone who, for instance, has left or has gone on leave. That really is a red flag that an internship position is not, in fact, a true student trainee position. More generally, you want to make sure that you're differentiating between populations of folks. So you could have a group of interns and a group of employees, and they might have overlapping activities, but you want to make sure that you differentiate between those 2 groups in meaningful ways so that it's clear that the intern is not just an unpaid subset of your paid employees. So for example, an intern could get additional responsibilities above and beyond what the employee gets that maybe are more pushing their skills and that might take them longer to complete, for example. They might get additional feedback. They might have additional time to complete tasks that employees wouldn't have, and they might get additional opportunities. Some of those opportunities that Carrie was talking about with respect to meetings and networking and exposure to governance bodies and upper management that really sort of employees who were at the same level would not get are really nice ways to differentiate your internship population from your employee population. The second piece of this factor is supervision, and I think we've already discussed supervision at length, so I won't belabor that point too much. As Carrie mentioned, supervision can be formal or informal. It really needs to be structured to best suit the culture of the internship site itself. The 4th factor is that the internship site derives no immediate advantage from the activities, and on occasion operations may actually be impeded. Okay, so what does that mean? Again, we're sort of harkening back to the second factor there. You'll see that these factors kind of blend and overlap quite a bit. And again, I think to say derives no immediate advantage is perhaps a little extreme here. It's okay for there to be a little bit of an advantage to the site. But this gets to the idea that interns should be doing primarily substantive work. Carrie's example of about less than 25% administrative work is a good guideline to use in thinking about this. As she mentioned, all of our jobs have some administration, and learning how to manage that administration is certainly part of being an effective employee in the workplace. But interns should have primarily substantive work. And this is a recognition that it's going to take an intern longer to do the job. That's okay, and in fact, that's kind of the point here. You could probably do the work that the intern is doing a lot quicker. But the value that the intern is going to get from doing good work at perhaps a slower pace and under careful supervision from you or your staff is really a critical piece of showing that there's no immediate advantage from the activities. And in fact, opportunities are impeded. One thing that, pointing to the documentation piece, one common and very simple suggestion that I always have in order to demonstrate not only supervision, but that the operations are actually being impeded, is to make supervision of interns a job responsibility for someone who's at your site. That shows that you're taking supervision seriously. It shows that you're thinking about it in an intentional way, and it shows that it's 5–10% of a person's job responsibilities. That supervision of the internship program. That can be critical to showing that person could have spent that 5–10% of their job time doing something else, but instead you've assigned them to manage and cultivate the internship program. Our 5th factor here is that the intern is not necessarily entitled to a job at the conclusion of the internship. I've been speaking about these issues for some time, and years ago, we kind of used to gloss over this factor. It's pretty straightforward, right? So you don't promise someone a job simply by virtue of having an internship. But as interns have gotten more sophisticated over the years and sites have gotten more sophisticated, we started talking a lot more about the conversion rate, which Carrie mentioned early on. And that's a really valuable part of having interns. It's an attractive benefit to both interns and to the site, and it does create that pipeline that we were talking about. So we don't want to give the impression that hiring an intern after they've done an internship is prohibited or will cut against you under the Department of Labor student trainee test. Rather, what we want to be emphasizing is that there shouldn't be a lockstep from internship to employment. In no way should an internship ever be sort of a test for an employment position. So, do this internship for 6 weeks, and then we'll allow you to keep doing the same thing, but as an employee later on. If you do have a situation where you're hiring your interns later on because they are a known commodity, because they know the business, because they're going to be able to hit the ground running, that's all well and good. But you want to make sure that there isn't that lockstep from internship to job. And our last factor here is this compensation piece. Intern and internship site understand that the student is not entitled to wages for the time spent at the internship. So again, remember, this test is most applicable for interns who are either unpaid or paid a stipend. The key here is really transparency. Transparency in expectations, transparency in language, and transparency in documentation. Even if an intern is unpaid, they may be subject to many employment rules and policies, a dress code, rules about discrimination and harassment, those types of things. And they may be, in some ways, looking like an employee. They get an orientation, they get assigned an email, those types of things. You want to make sure that even your unpaid interns understand very clearly what their role is and that they won't be entitled to wages for the time spent worked. This becomes even more important if an individual is paid a stipend. That stipend would most likely be paid through your payroll function. The folks may have to be onboarded through HR in order to meet obligations in order to work through the payroll system, those types of things. In that case, you want to make especially clear that you're being transparent with the individual that they are in fact receiving a stipend rather than wages for hours worked. And this can be made clear in an offer that perhaps reflects an individual's status as an intern rather than using employment type language. Sort of the baseline rule here is the more an individual looks and walks and talks like an employee, the more you need to make clear that they are in fact something different. They're an intern. Just a couple pieces about stipends. A stipend is, as Carrie said, a really wonderful incentive to encourage folks to put the time and effort that you want them to put and that they want to put into the internship. Stipends should not be tied to hours worked. The worst way to calculate a stipend is to figure out minimum wage and then multiply it by the number of hours that an individual is working. Rather, a stipend is a nominal amount of money that's used to incentivize an individual to participate in an experience. I don't recommend generally using timesheets. If you have folks who aren't being paid by the hour, that can lend to a lot of confusion. If it's necessary to track time for non-payment purposes, for example, the individual needs to keep track of the number of hours that they're working for their academic program, or your HR and legal folks have advised that it's important to keep track of time for Affordable Care Act purposes. You want to make sure that the timesheets, that everybody understands that the timesheets aren't for pay purposes, just through communication, through a note on those timesheets, whatnot. Obviously, you'll want to be consulting with your individual legal and tax advisors about the particulars about how these situations work in terms of withholdings, unemployment, workers' compensation, and the Affordable Care Act. The reality is that sometimes our branches of government aren't talking to each other as well as we hope that they might. So even if the Department of Labor is very clearly classifying an intern as not an employee for the student trainee test, the IRS may still be saying that they want withholdings held on the stipend paid in the same way that they would want wages paid. So those are situations that are particular to your individualized situations, and you'll want to make sure that you talk about those with your legal advisors. That's all the content that we have for you this afternoon. We're going to go to our the questions that you all have asked to see if we can maybe address some of them.
Expand, close to the right. See the arrows on the right. See the arrows on the right. Yes, the slides will not be emailed to you, but they will be available to you at the Women's Business Development Center website. And specifically, so you'll want to write this down, they'll be available under events, wbdc.org, events, so /events/online business education. And then you'll see a hot link that says archived webinars, and you'll be able to see them there.
And if you haven't had an opportunity to ask a question, please feel free to take a moment now. We'll be on the line here, and we hope to answer any questions that come in.
And both of our contact email information is up there too, so if you think of something later, feel free to reach out with a question.
Okay, so we have a new question. Do sole proprietor businesses have attraction to students?
Yes, they do. And at DePaul, we have a lot of students who are interested, have this sort of entrepreneurial spirit. The way that we present to students small business operations is really they're going to have a chance to work with the president of an organization, and they may not have the opportunity when they work in a Fortune 500 company. So yes, opportunities like that are very, students find those very interesting. We've had students do great internships with one-person companies, two-person companies, most likely where they're working remotely, but they've had great experiences.
So we have another question here that we're trying to get to, and I believe Terry asked it. That was Terry's question. Let's see if we have another question up here. We're going to ask our organizer to come in here and help us with this because we need to drag out the question box so we can see better.
Okay, and so the next question is, do we have access to the PowerPoint? And this presentation, yeah.
The bottom one. The bottom question. Okay. Yes. Yes, Carol, you do have access to the PowerPoint. As I said just a moment ago, you will be able to get it tomorrow, maybe even later today under our website, wbdc.org/events/online education, and then you'll see archived webinars, and that's where you'll find it.
Okay, and so there's one that, from Lane. Do you see a lot of value and success from students who work virtually with the business? And yes, I do. Again, I think if an older student, probably an older student is a little more appropriate for 100% virtual internship, and we've seen them work really well. I'm thinking of somebody right now. She's an executive coach herself. She works from home. She's had a marketing intern work with her, and the student worked from his apartment at DePaul, and she provided him with really great, challenging work experiences, and it was a great fit. So yes, it can have a lot of value, again, if it's done the right way. And I can also, there's this great white paper on virtual internships that's out there on the internet, and I can send a link to that as well in the follow-up information that we share that has some additional tips and advice on that. So the next question from Jacqueline, how does a company apply to offer internships? Okay, it's really easy. We use a job board, as I mentioned, through Handshake, and you don't have to send anything to me in advance before you post it. You want to make sure the internship that you post, the description is in detail, has job description duties, has learning goals and objectives, all that information we talked about. Once you post it, our team will approve it, and then it will be active for students to apply to. But I'm also happy to always send out internship postings if you email them to me directly and share it with faculty, staff, and other folks in the Career Center as an additional way to get exposure for that internship.
And Carrie, what's the link for that?
It is in the guide you're going to get. It's DePaul.joinhandshake, I believe, but I'll send that to you right afterwards. Yeah, it's in the guide. It's yeah, I believe it's DePaul.joinhandshake, but I'm going to send you the link to that. Do we have other questions?
I want to remind the listeners that the WBDC has a variety of webinars and workshops that you can take advantage of, and they're all listed under our website under wbdc.org/events and in chronological order. And in April we have another workshop that you might be interested in called Hiring Your First Employee. So different than what we've talked about today quite a bit, but it might be really useful for you to attend that also, because it'll help you differentiate more between being an employee and being an intern. So I encourage you to take that. I think we have another question. Do we?
Yep. The question is, do internships have to align with the DePaul academic calendar?
No, they do not. That's a great question. So we're on a quarter system at DePaul, so every 10 weeks. However, a student can start with you in the beginning, or I'm sorry, or in the middle of a quarter, if that timing works best for you. They can start in the middle of a quarter if they continue working with you throughout the next full quarter. So let's say they start April 15th, and that's for us the middle of the spring quarter. They can begin working with you with or without receiving academic credit, but if they want credit, they need to stay with you throughout the entire summer, which is when they would start the internship course. So we're very flexible on when students begin working internships with the companies, but if they want to receive credit, they do need to be there for the full consecutive quarter to take the class.
Well, I want to thank our guests, Carrie and Marla, for coming in today from DePaul. Clearly this is a well-attended webinar, and I think this is something that we want to offer again to our listeners. So please let other people know. And again, at WBDC, remember your business advising is always free because you've already paid for it with your tax dollars. And so we're happy to do one-on-one and group opportunities for learning, both in terms of workshops and advisement. We can help you get certified to do work with corporations and government entities. So we look forward to continuing to be your partner through your own business development, because we're here for you for the long haul, for the journey of your business life. So do come to us. We really want to continue to offer meaningful things that will help you grow your business. Thanks so much for joining us today. Bye-bye.